Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme we shall be discussing the unprecedented violence and riots that we've seen in recent weeks and asking the important question, is our society now beyond repair? And in this programme today I'm joined by Sid Cordle, the leader of the Christian People's Alliance, and together with Dr. Sarah Tongue from Prayer for Parliament. So welcome to the programme. Sid, it's great to have you back on Politics Today. I've got to say that both Helen and Maureen have been outstanding guests on this programme. Their contribution to the programme has been excellent. But do you want to give us a kind of update on the Christian People's Alliance, particularly as we have a new parliament and a new government in power?
Okay, well, our aim in the Christian People's Alliance is to be a light to the nation. And I think we've got an excellent manifesto. I think anyone that's read our manifesto would say, wow, that's amazing. And really, the manifesto comes from listening to God. It's literally saying, God, what is your heart? And we seek to hear God's heart and put it forward in any and every situation. During the general election, we didn't have as many candidates as we wanted. Our target was 100 candidates and we ended up with only 22. So we need more people to come forward, and we didn't have the finance we wanted. We probably spent about £15,000 altogether. When you think that the main parties are spending millions, you realise we're massively underfunded. And we didn't have Christians, by and large, come out in support of us. And it's quite interesting. I was actually reading an email from Greenpeace. Not that I support Greenpeace in any way, shape or form, but I like to know what my opposition is up to. And it's quite interesting how they were boasting of the thousands of doors that they'd knocked on for the Green in support of the Green Party, literally millions of leaflets which they put out in support of the Green Party as all part of their campaign in the general election. And I think what people have got to appreciate is that what we need is Christians getting behind the Christian People's Alliance while at the same time lobbying other political parties for Christian issues, which is basically what Greenpeace does. They get behind the Green Party, but they also lobby Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative parties on green issues. And that's the approach that we should take. But we're not getting behind the Christian People's Alliance and the Christian Church, and that's what we need. What we're doing now is organising our assembly, which will take place on the 4th and 5th of October in Hitchin.
Excellent. And Sarah, it's great to have you back on the programme, and representing Prayer for Parliament. You've got your work cut out in this Parliament, haven't you? I mean, the most secular, atheist Parliament in our nation's history. Share with us the immense challenge facing Christians in Parliament right now, because there's very few of them left, and how important it is to pray even more that we have such a secular, atheist government in power.
Absolutely. The good news is that if we come to persecution, more people will be saved. That's the good news. The uphill battle is not dissimilar to what Sid was saying, really, which is that we need to just hunker down and pray. The group that goes into Parliament, August is an unusual month because of Parliament being closed, and we have been going in, although for the first time in a very, 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 very long time, we were turned away this past week. I don't know what that's indicative of, other than perhaps just too many tourists and they didn't want to have to deal with more people. But it is hard work. It is hard praying. The mood is different. And I think we feel challenged by the fact that there are the vast majority of people that we were liaising with were Christians, and many of those have lost their seats. So we are, just like everybody else, waiting to see what's happening, but in the meantime, praying it through.
Yeah, we're doing a very important job. Appreciate that. And Sid, for our viewers watching this programme today, obviously it's called Politics Today, but share with us why it's so important that Christians get involved in politics and work to transform our society to become more righteous and more godly.
Okay, well, Christianity is all about kingdom. It's quite interesting. In Matthew's Gospel, kingdom is mentioned 54 times. Church is only mentioned 3 times. And I think, if you look at the Lord's Prayer, perhaps that's where it comes out most clearly. Because Jesus said, when you pray, pray along these lines. Our Father who's in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Which tells us 2 things. First is that God's will is not automatically done, because if it was, we wouldn't have to pray. But it tells us that as we pray, we can see a realm where God's kingdom comes on earth in exactly the same way as it's done in heaven, where we see God's will over every situation on earth. And that's basically what we're aiming for, if you like, in the Christian People's Alliance, to operate in the kingdom with kingdom work and seeing God's kingdom established, God's kingdom advanced, God's kingdom promoted.
And Sarah, we've been off air for 3 weeks because of the summer break, and it's been a very dramatic 3 weeks in this nation's, particularly with all the unprecedented violence that we've seen, particularly after that horrific and savage attack in Southport in Merseyside, where 3 young girls were hacked to death. And that then sparked riots and lawlessness across the nation. So just reflect upon the last 3 weeks. What is your perspective on what essentially is the kind of unprecedented violence, but also this lawlessness that we're seeing as our society is breaking down?
I think the roots are very much spiritual. The people who acted out in a violent response were just waiting for something to trigger them, I suppose, consciously or unconsciously. I'm not saying they were sitting around waiting for an excuse, but that certainly is what happened. But also it's spiritual, and we can see it's very, very dark times. And even the carnival this weekend, some of the stuff that was occurring and that have been aired on television, it's just, some of it's rude, some of it's violent. We are in a society that's moving quickly toward barbarism, which is what Jesus came to stop.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts?
Unfortunately, the police have lost the support of large parts of the country, and they are now trying to govern without the support of literally thousands and thousands of people in the country, and that is the root of the problem.
We do have a big problem. And also media reports effectively say that the reason why our streets became violent, why we saw so much violence and rioting, was misinformation put out on social media posts. And share with us how in these times, when it comes to assessing information, that we have to be very vigilant, we need to check our own facts and not believe everything that we're told. Even though we think we can trust that particular media source, it turned out to be wrong and had very dire consequences.
Well, it's absolutely true. We do need to check our sources, but then we copy what we see. And when, was it October 10th, when the hospital was supposedly bombed in Gaza, which it wasn't, but that's what triggered, excuse me, the first of a continual Saturday, and now it seems to be, pardon me, random days of pro-Palestinian protests. That was the BBC. They didn't wait for their information, and they didn't seem to learn from it. And so now everybody's doing the same thing. They're copying the lead broadcaster in the nation by responding knee-jerk reactions to things. Yes, we absolutely have to be vigilant. We have to be responsible for what we say and what we do. And so on the one side, we need to make sure we're sending out things that are true. And on the other side, we need to pray discernment as Christians, but also check our facts and make sure before we react or before we send on information that's coming through. And so the problem is exacerbated. But the thing that Sid mentioned, what really irritates him, what irritates me is none of the broadcasters, nobody seems to be pointing out the fact that the pro-Palestinian marches and the anger and the violence and the hostility that was triggered by the BBC, it's exactly the same thing triggered by these riots in the last 3 weeks. The same sort of thing, misinformation. But nobody's kind of drawing the connection between the two. And the violence that started with BLM and then progressed to pro-Palestinian, yes, a lot of it is peaceful, but a lot of it is right on the edge.
Well, a lot of it's incitement to genocide.
Yes, and then Absolutely. And then now we have out and out violence. But what is going to happen? And it's just escalating and escalating. The Notting Hill Carnival had violence. They try to steer people away from thinking that it's violent. But it is violent. And unless you look at the facts and look at the truth and embrace the truth and deal with it, it's nothing's going to change. And it's just the score is just getting ramped up higher and higher and higher.
Yeah. And Sid, what are your thoughts on how our new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is responding to the unprecedented violence and lawlessness on our streets? He gave a press conference recently in which he responded to these unlawful and violent riots by wanting to increase authoritarian powers of the state and the police, these including using face recognition technology, a nationwide police unit that can be deployed anywhere where there's violence or trouble, instead of allowing the local police to respond to those issues. He also has been arresting people for posting social media comments, and of course there is no place for allowing hatred and particularly spreading hatred online, but he's taking this extremely seriously. But he's ignoring the problem of mass illegal immigration. And also he doesn't see there's a big problem when it comes to some of our ethnic communities are failing to integrate into British society and tackling that issue.
Yeah, you see, to me, the issue is this. When it came to Black Lives Matter that we talk about, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, Keir Starmer will say, well, we've got to look and see what's behind this anger. We've got to understand what's behind it. And he's even took the knee to Black Lives Matter and said, yes, I support you. I understand why you're upset and why you're angry. When it came to these riots over Southport, there was no wish whatsoever to understand what was behind it. There was something very serious behind it. There was a feeling that there was illegal immigration that had led to this horrific event that happened in Southport. That was what was behind it. But Keir Starmer wasn't interested in what was behind it. He was only interested in clamping down very hard on anyone that had taken part in the violence, or anyone that even tweeted something in support of it, and getting large numbers arrested, boasting of the numbers that he got arrested and put in prison, and so on and so forth. Now, that is two-tier policing. And it's two-tier government as well from Keir Starmer. And that is what is, to me, utterly unacceptable. And if I might say so, I think it was really brought to a head, if you like, when Mark Rowley was asked by a Sky News reporter, what have you got to say about two-tier policing in this country? And he grabbed the microphone and threw it to the ground. The Chief of Police in London. Now, to me, that is utterly irresponsible and shows, frankly, that our police are on the wrong track and our government is on the wrong track.
Absolutely. And Sarah, we have to address many of these social issues, and some of the big social issues now is really effectively living in a society now that's increasingly becoming more and more lawlessness. We're seeing on our streets, complete lack of respect for anyone else. And what would you think's behind so much of the social unrest and so much of the social problems that we're facing in this nation as well? Because sadly, it looks like our society is broken and there is no government that's going to be able to fix it.
I think what's behind it is fear. So when the violence did arise through Black Lives Matter, they needed to address that violence. When they didn't address that violence and let that go for whatever reason, then that stores up, you can get away with it. Then the pro-Palestinian protests and some of the violence, that was pushed aside because, well, we have to understand, that's fine. No wonder it has escalated. It's the same sort of thing as with shoplifting. The press is saying nobody's getting done for shoplifting, so the shoplifting is going to increase. The bottom line is if people are too afraid to address a topic that is creating violence, then all of that's going to do is allow more violence, and it's going to continue to increase. The perfect love casts out fear. The government and the powers that be and the authorities and the police and so on and so on, it doesn't matter which government, they are full of fear. They do not understand Judeo-Christian values by and large. That is slipping away even more with the change in government and fewer Christian MPs. And so that concept of love gets warped. Oh, we'll sympathize, we'll empathize, we'll have pity for those who are undervalued or underclassed, until we get to a point where, oh, we can identify with these people and we know they're wrong, so we're going to clamp down hard. If they had clamped down on violence, irrespective of who's done it or why, if they've clamped down on violence in the first place, we wouldn't be in this place.
Absolutely, make a very good point there, Sarah. And Sid, as Christians, we have to totally condemn violence as a use of political expression. But what do you think are some of the underlying reasons we're seeing today that working class white males feel disenfranchised from our society, disenfranchised from our political system, and so therefore they are struggling to kind of find a voice? And what they're particularly concerned about is the growing influence of different ethnic minorities in their communities, not integrating with the rest of society, and then finding out that that these immigrants are coming in and they're giving housing and government benefits without having to work for them, and this is creating more and more social resentment. So is there how can, for example, our government and also our society give a voice to the issues of concern facing white working class males?
Okay, well, I think the first thing they need to do is to show an understanding of what's going on. You see, in the world, according to Open Doors, there's 360 million Christians being persecuted. And there's also a situation where other groups in the world are being persecuted. But it's not Christians coming over here on boats as illegal immigrants. It's almost entirely Muslims coming over here on boats and illegal immigrants. So they're not fleeing persecution. It's not people fleeing persecution that are coming over here. So what's going on? You see, it's not just in the UK, it's happening obviously Italy, Spain, Germany, United States. United States, I reckon, have had over 5 million immigrants. In my view, what's going on is a concerted effort to export Islam to the West, to make the West more Islamic. Now, I believe that's what's going on. It's an agenda. Now, what the left is doing is saying, you're welcome, come. You're welcome. We welcome immigrants. Give them whatever they want. Build more houses. Let them have free education. Let them have free health service. We should just welcome any immigrants who want to come. It's all the open borders idea, if you like.
Yep.
Now, that is what is causing resentment to people that have lived here all their life and lived here for generations, that have worked here, that have built up the country, and they feel as though they're just opening the doors to welcome in people that have got an agenda to change our society, to make it something different, because they want to make it more like the societies that they've left. And the government, instead of actually supporting those that have worked hard in the country, that have been here for years and so on and so forth, are actually discarding that whole part of society and focusing all their attention on people coming in. Now, that's where we've got, unfortunately, a divide. And what government needs to do is understand what's going on, understand why people feel offended and upset, and restrict the immigration to what is manageable and acceptable.
A case in point that totally supports that is the large influx of Ukrainians because of the war with Russia, and the large influx of Hong Kong people because of what was happening in Hong Kong. I don't sense hostility toward those people who are working hard, who are trying to contribute to their communities and be a part of those communities. And the difference is language. It's very, very difficult to assimilate if you don't speak the language. But if you're not willing to learn the language, then obviously you don't want to assimilate. So part of the issue that could be resolved in some measure is, if you are allowed to stay in this country, there's your lesson, there's your seat, you need to learn the language. and be tested on it.
Absolutely. But how much of all this is coming out of the destruction of our Judeo-Christian heritage that successive governments really since the 90s have been pursuing, and replacing it with a kind of multiculturalism, and that we don't have kind of any values, the nation state doesn't matter anymore, it's a thing of the past. Patriotism, well, we're ashamed to wave the British flag or the flags of our, unlike the Welsh or the Scots or the Irish. The English seem to have a problem embracing the flag, because the flag gets attacked. We only see it really come out with major football tournaments. But then that patriotism is attacked, family is attacked, everything that's associated with a nation state is attacked.
I think there's a huge naivety, which Sid touched on as well, a huge naivety about Islam. It's not the Muslims, it's not the Arabs, it's not the color of their skin, it's not even the language. It's the agenda of the Islamic religion and the Islamic state. And the difference between other people coming in and those with Islamic background, and this is not Islamophobic, and if I get arrested, well, we'll see what happens. But the difference is they have an agenda, and the government is naive and not recognizing the damage. We can see it, and the Bible talks about, you know, you can see it, but you're veiled. With the pro-Palestinian marches and all the offshoots of it, it is evident, is absolutely clear what the agenda is. And we already have Sharia law in certain areas. But the difference is that the government, they don't seem to mind anything except Christianity. So we'll let the Christian values go. It doesn't matter what they're exchanged with, because we have I'm not talking about the government now, I'm talking about globalism and all the cultural communism and all of that sort of stuff. Well, we have that. What they don't realize in their naivety, or choose not to see or not to acknowledge, is that the Islamic agenda is extremely powerful, and we are sitting ducks if nothing is done.
Yep.
That's the bottom line.
And that's the battle we face today, isn't it, Sid? The fact that we are seeing the demise of our Judeo-Christian heritage. We've seen that Jesus has been kicked out of our schools, out of our public square. We have the most secular, atheistic government and parliament in our nation's history. We know there's a core element of Islamists that now make up the Labour government, and this is influencing the Labour government decisions. And by progressing this liberal progressive agenda that successive governments have done, be it Conservative or Labour, it meant that this has created a political and spiritual vacuum that has been filled by the Islamist agenda known as the Red-Green Alliance. How do we push back against that? Because only Jesus has the answers to solve our society's ills and problems as our society is breaking down, and we're seeing a fragmentation in our society, and it's definitely disunited.
That's right. Well, the way we deal with it is to speak out and expose what's going on. That's all we can do, because at the end of the day, Christian values include things like you shall not bear false witness, you shall not steal, you shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery. Now, all those values are Judeo-Christian values, which are not found in other religions to a large extent, and are certainly not part of any atheistic moral culture. You see, as I sometimes say, atheists have actually got no moral code. I mean, there's nothing, for instance, in Stalin's moral code that said it was wrong for him to kill about 80 million people in order to cleanse his society of undesirables. Because atheists don't have a moral code. We have a moral code, which is the teaching of Jesus and the Ten Commandments. And they provide a very strong, sound basis for society. And unless we get back to those values and uphold and support those values, certainly our society will be hindered and affected.
And I think
within 15 seconds, how should we be praying about our nation and this new government?
We need to ask the Lord how to pray. We need to digest what's happening and not be afraid. I believe we need to bring in the Ten Commandments, because the vast majority, those people that protested against those children being killed, We're angry because our basic values coming from the Ten Commandments are being squashed.
Sarah and Sid, thank you so much for being my guests on this week's Politics Day. You've done a great job. Thank you for watching at home. There is no doubt that our nation is broken. Our society is broken. We are facing unprecedented lawlessness, and we need to pray like we never prayed before. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.